Welcome back to the SN classes. So today let us deal with some of the MCQ questions regarding the biology subject. Okay, so first let us see the first question. Which is the powerhouse of the cell, or else what is the powerhouse of the cell? Option A, nucleus. Option B, ribosome. Option C, mitochondria. Option D, Golgi apparatus. Your time is 5 seconds. Your answer is option C, mitochondria. So the mitochondria that generates the ATP molecules. ATP nothing but adenosine triphosphate molecules. So which carries the or else which produces the energy to whole body to whole cell. Okay, and it makes them as a powerhouse of the cell. So you have to know one thing here. The mitochondria that produces the ATP, which is simply called as adenosine triphosphate, that produces like ATP nothing but energy. Okay, so that is produced to whole cell, and it makes as a powerhouse of the cell. And here is a diagram you can observe here. This is a mitochondria, and there is another information, important information about the mitochondria, that is, so here the mitochondria that contains its own DNA. It doesn't depend on the nucleus for the genetic material, and it the mitochondria has its own genetic material and information. Okay, so here another question can arise. Which of the organelle in the cell that consists of its own DNA except nucleus? So here the organelles that consist of its own DNA means there are two organelles. One is mitochondria and the another one is chloroplast. Whereas in animals there is mitochondria, but there is absence of chloroplast, right? So if they ask particularly in the animals, which in the animal cell, which of the organelle that consists of its own DNA genetic material means, you have to answer it as mitochondria. If they ask in the plant cell, there are two organelles which can produce its own DNA, which has its own DNA genetic material, means mitochondria and the chloroplast. Okay, let us move on to the second question, that is, which biomolecule is responsible for the sorting of the genetic information? Option A, carbohydrates. Option B, proteins. Option C, DNA. Option D, lipids. Your answer is option C, DNA. So here the DNA full form is deoxyribonucleic acid, which can carry the genetic material and sort the genetic material into different kinds, whereas it can maintain the growth, development, and functioning, and it also helps in the reproduction in all the living organisms. This is the main function of the DNA. Here the DNA consists of some of the carbohydrate and some of the molecules like adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And here also one of the question arises: which of the part is the backbone of the DNA? The answer is phosphate is a backbone of the DNA. Okay, so let us move on to the third question. Which part of the brain that can control and balance and also coordination? Which part of the brain controls, balances, and also helps for the coordination? Your options are cerebrum. Option A, cerebrum. Option B, cerebellum. Option D, medulla oblongata. Option D, hypothalamus. Your answer is option B, cerebellum. So here the cerebellum is responsible for the maintenance of the balance, coordination, and the fine motor control in all the communication, nerves communication, and etc. Okay, let us move on to the fourth question, that is, what is the main function of the RBCs? Nothing but red blood cells. The option is option A, fighting infections. Option B, transporting the oxygen. Option C, blood clotting. Option D, producing the hormones. Your answer is option B, transporting the oxygen. So here the RBC's main function is that transports the oxygen because there is the presence of one of the pigment, that is hemoglobin. The hemoglobin is a pigment that is present inside the RBC cells. Okay, red blood cells. So here in the hemoglobin molecules, for each hemoglobin molecules, four oxygen molecules that binds to the each hemoglobin. So each hemoglobin that consists of four oxygen molecules, and these are transmitted to all over the body, tissues, organs, everything. Okay, so in this picture you can observe here the oxygen is taken from the lungs to the rbc cells, and this rbc, in the rbc cell there is a presence of hemoglobin. Here the yellowish structures you can see, right? So these are the hemoglobin. So those are getting binding, so these hemoglobins gets binded to the oxygen molecules. Each hemoglobin contains four oxygen molecules which are binded to the hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin later transfers this oxygen to the heart. So you can observe here all this process. Okay, so let us move on to the fifth question, that is, which enzyme is responsible for the breaking down of the starch into the maltose? Option A, pepsin. Option B, amylase. Option C, lipase. Option D, trypsin. Your answer is option B, amylase. So, amylase is a type of enzyme which is produced or is found in the saliva. Okay, so salivary glands that can produce us this type of amylase, which later that helps to function in the pancreas to break down the starch or else carbohydrate. It is a starch is a type of carbohydrate, right? So, starch which helps in the breakdown of the starch into the maltose, means to the simpler sugar. So here starch is a macro, nothing but a larger thing, but maltose is a simpler sugar. Okay, so starch is broken down into the maltose with the help of amylase. So amylase is a type of enzyme which is found and secreted in the saliva. Okay, thank you so much.